Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion today. Interactive discussion it will be. My name is Peter Jarich. I'm VP of Consumer and Infrastructure Research here at Current Analysis. And we're going to have a great discussion today between myself, Benoit Fleury, VP of Product Innovation at iBwave, and Ronny Haraldsvik, SVP and CMO at SpiderCloud Wireless. Really hope to make this a interactive discussion, so I'll be setting the stage, giving some thoughts about what I plan to see at Mobile World Congress, what I think Mobile World Congress 2015 is going to look like, and the topics we'll be talking about. And then after that, really, going over and digging into some of those topics with Ronny and Benoit. So should be a great conversation. I'm glad to see that we've got a good number of participants, so I'm really excited for it. Before we begin, though, I want to do a few things. Let's just take care of a few housekeeping items. First, although there won't be slides for the presentation today, it will be a discussion. We will be sending out links later on in the week. They'll give you a link to the recording of this discussion. So if you want, you can pass it along to friends, colleagues, family, anyone you think that would benefit from it and couldn't be here. Second, as I mentioned, this is going to be, we really want this to be an interactive discussion. So we really encourage you guys to use the question panel and send in any questions you have during the session. Some of those, if they fit into the discussion, we'll try and answer actually in the discussion, particularly where they're pertinent. Otherwise, we'll try and save some time at the end, probably 10, 15 minutes, where we'll address those questions that you have. Finally, if you have some audio difficulties, sometimes that happens. We'll be doing our best over here, myself, Benoit, Ronny, all of us, to speak as loudly as we can. We'll be doing our best on that part, but just make sure that your own audio settings are actually set up so that everything works. Same with the phone, and as any good IT person would tell you, if all else fails, just close everything down and start up again, because sometimes that tends to work. Once again, please send in the questions. We're here to really share some insights, share our thoughts on what we're going to see at Mobile World Congress, what we're seeing in our own industries, but really benefits if we have some questions for you guys. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce today's speakers. We have Benoit Fleury, VP of Products and Innovation at iBwave, and Ronny Haraldsvik with SpiderCloud Wireless. Hey, Benoit. Hey, Ronny.
Hey, Peter. Good to be
Hello,
on again.
Peter.
Good. Good. So we know their phones are working. That's a good thing. Before we dig into that, or before I dig into what I think we're going to see at Mobile World Congress, for those folks that don't know, either don't know you guys personally, don't know your companies, let's just do a little bit of an intro. So Benoit, why don't you tell us a bit about iBwave, a bit about what you do there, and your perspective on what you're bringing to Mobile World Congress.
Sure. Okay, so iBwave is a Canadian-based company. It was founded in 2003, so just over 11 years ago now. And so we're really focused on providing software products to plan and design in-building wireless systems. So our focus is really on in-building. And so these systems are regardless of technology or architecture, and they're also vendor independent. So today we serve over 700 customers in some 87 countries, and that includes operators, system integrators, equipment vendors. And we also offer various levels of certification, and we've got several thousand certified users worldwide. So that's iBwave. Myself, I'm responsible for evolving iBwave's current products, as well as expanding our overall product portfolio. So we define and launch new products to market, but we also work with partners that have complementary solutions to ours, so that we can offer better and more complete end-to-end in-building wireless solutions for our customers. So that's pretty well it.
Yeah, it sounds like you've given that description at least once before. It was nice and concise. You had it down. Thanks, Benoit. Ronny, I think probably not too many people that don't know you or haven't heard of SpiderCloud, at least those in the mobile space. So why don't for those few souls out there that haven't gotten the story, why don't you fill them on in?
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter, for the intro. Well, SpiderCloud Wireless. I mean, we're a company that's since 2008 been just maniacally focused on creating a scalable small cell system that is deployed into medium and large enterprises by our customers, who are the licensed mobile operators. So we have a system that scales up to about 100 sectors plus, with one simple services node that sits in the telco closet inside of the enterprise, with a secure connection back into the operator's network. EPC for LTE and IUH gateway for 3G. And it's simply deployed over any existing local area network, Cat5, Cat6, and we have a dual band radio that handles both 3G bands and 4G bands, or dual 4G bands, which has sort of become our bread and butter and very popular over the last year and a half. Our customers include Vodafone, Verizon, among others. That's also available on our website. And myself, I had the pleasure of actually leading a small but very effective marketing team over here at SpiderCloud Wireless. And we're very much looking forward to Mobile World Congress with more announcements and more progress in the small cells area.
Wonderful. It seems like both of you guys going into Mobile World Congress or anything small and effective sounds like it's always a challenge, but hopefully by being focused, we can you get some attention. So let me, actually maybe that's a good place to start, just from a marketing standpoint. We've been talking a bit about what we're going to see, or we're going to be talking about what we're going to see at Mobile World Congress. Maybe that's a good place to start. Even before we get into specific subtopics or technologies, how do you guys think about Mobile World Congress from that aspect? Both smaller companies, both showing up at a place where you have massive booths, massive budgets. How do you view the value of Mobile World Congress from that aspect, even besides the technologies? Maybe it's impossible to separate those two things, but as you look at it, whether it's from new products you're launching or just the storytelling, how does that work out for you guys?
Well, I'll kick it off here, Benoit, and then you please jump in. You can spend $5 million and bring 100 people, or you can spend 1/10 of that, or even less, so even 100,000 and bring just a few people. But it's the only place where you can actually meet with 20, 30 mobile operators and business partners in the span of 4 days. So it continues to be by all means the place to go. And from a marketing perspective, it's actually the only event that we spend money on, where we actually have a booth presence, just because it's well worth its time and money.
Yeah, I can attest to that. We have a booth and a few other shows throughout the year, but I would say that this is the main one for us. This is where we invest the most, and very high quality meetings that we have at this particular show. As you said, Ronnie, there's a lot of operators, and in fact from all over the world that attend. And so for us, we invest a lot into it, and we start planning it months before. And we line up a lot of meetings ahead of time, and so they end up being very busy, but they're mostly preset meetings, and they tend to be very high-quality meetings. And it's been like this consistently for the past several years for us. So it's a great show. But
so if I were to summarize, one, I'm not going to show up at either of your booths for breakfast. You're not going to have a big breakfast spread where I can just sort of sit around and relax all day.
Peter, I'm going to go on record saying this. I think Ericsson serves the best breakfast in town, so if you're invited to that area of Hall 2, by all means you should go.
Okay. I probably wouldn't be able to hide in the corner of your booth and not be noticed, would I?
No, we're bigger this year, so we'll, we can hide you.
That's good. That's good. But second is if you put the work in ahead of time. If you don't put the work in ahead of time, it's probably not a good show, but if you put the work in ahead of time, arrange those meetings, plan a good marketing setup that will get the attention, that you can get some notoriety and make value out of it.
Yeah, that's our experience for sure.
So I promised I would be quick about it, but I promised I would give a little bit of a level set of what I expect to see at Mobile World Congress from a technology and a theme standpoint. And I've said it's probably a bit of a occupational hazard as an industry analyst, been in that space for a while, that sort of second nature, just to sort of set things off, set the stage, not necessarily, and I think this is, everyone has their own style, not necessarily say this is gospel, this is what we're going to see, and trust me, and don't argue with me, but sort of put it out there of, here's what we think is going to happen, and set that up as a starting point for a discussion. And I can say around Mobile World Congress 2015, for analysis, we can put in a good deal of thought into that for a few reasons. One is that we remarked back around the CES timeframe that a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same messages at CES, we're going to get repeated over at Mobile World Congress, right? That if you look at beyond the gadgets, beyond the drones, beyond the cell phone covers and all the stuff that sort of were the real consumer side of CES, that some of the bigger themes there in terms of IoT, in terms of video, in terms of connectivity, really carry over to Mobile World Congress in terms of how those get enabled. And so I think we have an idea already of what we're going to see. But beyond that, we're already seeing a lot of our customers and the companies that our customers are interested in are beginning to do some of their marketing, some of their messaging. It's something that we've always recommended to customers, that if you have a chance to get your marketing out ahead of a big trade show like Mobile World Congress, you're more likely to get the attention of someone who's making their plans for Mobile World Congress and say, hey, I need to go and see SpiderCloud, I need to go and see iBwave, because they see the announcement 2 weeks ahead of time, than actually getting anyone to pay attention to your news in the middle of the show when they're rushing from Hall 1 to Hall 8 and they're trying to get to the keynote or whatever it is. So we've always recommended that, getting out the messaging earlier, and we've seen some of that already from a number of companies. So I think we have a pretty good idea of what the big trends are going to be, what those themes are going to be, and there's a handful there, right? It's the biggest mobile-focused trade show in the world, so everything is going to get some sort of mention. Everything is going to be some sort of theme on a minor level, but we think the big ones are pretty easy to identify. Internet of Things. I talked about connectivity at CES. It's impossible to get away from the telecom space without some discussion of Internet of Things. We can debate if that really means anything, if it's just a marketing term, if it's just a big, vague marketing term that doesn't serve any purpose, or if it's really meaningful. But it's clear that from the connectivity side of things to how we manage connectivity, to how we manage the devices, to what Internet of Things will do for various verticals, that's going to get mentioned a number of times, and I think a lot of people will be linking whatever they do back to that. Part and parcel of that, I think we're going to hear a lot about people who are enabling Internet of Things, whether that's on the RAN side of things scaling, whether that's in the core scaling. You're going to hear a lot about virtualization, right? That one way or another, we're taking those functions that used to be physical network functions, and moving them into virtual network functions. We saw a lot of that last year, and it seems like last year was an extension of 2013, where 2013 SDN really took over the show. Last year it was really much more about NFV, and this year it'll probably be much more about being commercial, but doubtless we're going to hear a lot about virtualization. Now, I mentioned the virtual RAN side of things. And it seems that in one form or another, that virtualization story then leads into a larger HETnet story. That's not as new, right? If virtualization was really the last 2 years, HETnets have been a discussion for, 5+ years easily. And I think it's clearly going to extend in part for really meeting those customer demands, right? How do you solve customer pain points? How do you deliver a solid customer experience, whether that's in terms of capacity, whether that's in terms of coverage, but how do we use small cells combined with macro cells to deliver that experience? And then, of course, no HETnet conversation would really be complete without some inclusion of Wi-Fi. This year, I think the Wi-Fi discussion gets a little bit more complex, particularly as we include things like pushing LTE into unlicensed spectrum, but that's going to be a big discussion point. We saw that, again, going back from CES, where we had some initial LTE LAA launches. We had Ericsson make their push into the market. I'm sure there will be other vendors following suit. So that's my expectation. And then finally, I kind of hit this in the beginning with the IoT discussion. Really hope, and I think it's more than a hope, but I expect to see some theme around different verticals and recognizing verticals getting pulled into to really everything that we talk about in terms of mobility. Last year was on a panel. Someone referred to Mobile World Congress as a telco show, and I in part disagree with that because it's about much more than telcos, but I understand that impression. So I expect that as the market, as we're maturing towards things like IoT, a better understanding of the need to really engage with different verticals and to pull those verticals into the larger mobility story. But a last point before I open this up to Ronny and Benoit is that I think about this, and I think about all those topics, right? IoT, virtualization, HETnets, unlicensed spectrum, towing in different verticals. The one common theme that seems to link all of those is this theme of 5G. And we heard a bit about 5G last year. Between last year and this year, there's been, I don't want to say nonstop messaging, but a solid set of messaging from vendors, from carriers, talking about 5G trials, talking about 5G research, talking about 5G definitions. And to the extent that 5G serves as a marketing framework that can help discuss and really help pull in all those other topics, I really expect this is going to be the year we hear a lot about 5G at Mobile World Congress, to the point where it gets a little bit sickening. So I'll sort of leave it at that, because I promise to be at least not too long-winded for a change here. So Benoit, Ronny, I mean, what do you guys think? Is it going to be a 5G year? Do you think that we're past that, and people are going to be a little bit less out there and more pragmatic with their marketing? What do you think we're going to hear about?
So Peter, I think you're teasing me on purpose, because using the word 5G term with me is like putting in just a big red blanket in front of the bull. So I think you're right, though. It's going to be an enormous amount of, buzzwords, as you pointed out, NFV, SDN, virtualization, cloud, and so forth, the connected devices, and, also the term that I like to refer to as the cop-out term, which is Internet of Things. All of this, I do believe, could fit under an umbrella, and if we elect to call that 5G and actually define what 5G is, that would be, I think, important. We've done our own surveys in this space, and we also firmly believe that 5G won't be about spectrum or bandwidth or speed, but it's going to be more about service level agreements and QoS that ties all of this together. And of course, not to forget about LTE, LTE Advanced, small cells, and probably the most important thing of all, security. So it's a good wrapper to put around this and call it 5G, if the industry agrees what 5G is.
How about you, Benoit? Do you think you've heard enough already about 5G, or are you excited to go to Barcelona and get pounded over the head by it?
But this is such a big show. It's a very broad show. It's got a lot of players, so of course we're going to hear about a lot of those things. And definitely, I agree. We're going to hear a lot about 5G. Frankly, I'm not quite sure yet what 5G is, but it's a combination of different things for sure. But an important theme is going to be how a lot of these technologies all work together. Whether it's licensed or unlicensed spectrum, working together and interacting and improving the end-user experience or the quality of service. I think Ronny touched on it earlier, but I think that is going to be an increasingly important theme going forward. Virtualization as well. We're hearing more and more. There's more and more concrete offerings that are being now in the market. So I think that's going to be an important theme as well. And for me, what's exciting about that is just an opportunity for more innovation and faster time to market and a lot more scaling. So I think virtualization is becoming more and more concrete in a way. So I expect to hear a lot about that as well.
So, let's bring this back to one of those topics that I mentioned. I think, if nothing else, because I know you guys have some strong opinions, some strong thoughts on it, would be the HETnet discussion.
Yeah.
Talked a bit about HETnets. I know, you guys are all, from the small cell side of things, involved in that. So, part of where we have the conversation between 5G and HETnets, or 5G and small cells, is, obviously within the idea of network densification. Right, from the perspective of delivering those higher data rates, delivering really what should be, a 99.999%, 5.9 uptime, delivering the coverage and the capacity of that hasn't been there. But a lot of times, when I look at the early definitions of 5G, not from a use case or a business case, but from a technical perspective, a lot of those really revolve around the technologies that are going to enable that, the technologies that allow us to have better coordination between the macro cell network and the small cell network, the technologies that will allow for dense deployments, super dense deployments of small cells. And you'll sometimes hear this within the framework of, well, we really haven't seen small cells get deployed to the scale that people once talked about. All those early analyst forecasts that said we're going to have, massive scale in small cells, they all got it wrong, and it's because of the technology, right? We just need to get the technology out there that will make this all work, and then we can go forward. From your perspective, you guys are out there deploying these. You guys are out there. You're seeing the deployments. You talked about your customers, Ronny. You talked about your solutions for deploying them, Benoit. Is that a fair, is that a fair way to look at it, that the market has moved slower because the technologies haven't been there, or is it really just a function of you need to get these deployed? It's a function of how you deploy them and how you plan for those deployments, and it's not really the issue of technology versus experience with planning solutions that's really that really may be some of what's holding it back. How do you guys think about that?
So Benoit, do you want to take this first, and then I'll jump in?
Yeah, I can start with that. So I think for a while, you're correct. I think the technology was not quite there. A lot of different aspects of technology. We spoke with so many operators are in wait-and-see mode. A lot of trials have been going on for the past couple of years. But I think, I would say in the past year, we've seen an incredible progress in terms of the various small cell. We're talking about small cells here, I guess, as a key element of the HETnet that you started with. But in terms of small cell deployment, the equipment is now increasingly there. It's now supporting LTEs, supporting multi-technologies. They are becoming much more compact now, and yeah, a lot of the sun was maybe overpromised in the early days. We're starting to see this now, interacting amongst each other and with the external and the macro environment. So I think to a large extent now the technology is there. I think the products are there. They've been trialed to death over the past few years. I think now, from what we see anyway, is a shift towards more deployment and the process around deployment to figure out a way to be able to scale those deployments in a way which is economical. That I think is a big challenge that we see with many operators worldwide. Is the deployment now is around the challenge rather is around the process for economically deploying these systems. Not so much the technology anymore, I don't think. I don't know, Ronny, do you agree with that? Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, I think what he's saying, Ronny, is that your technology really doesn't matter. that you can make this work with whatever old, stupid, 5-year-old technology from anyone. That's what I got out of it.
Well, let's start with what you referred to in the beginning as 5G, which is kind of more in the term which is LTE advanced when it comes to the mobile technologies, when it comes to the coordination and so on and so forth, and that those things are important moving forward. But coming back to your question, we've had a couple of false starts in small cells, partially because small cells as a topic we just sort of lumped in there, and whether it was indoor, outdoor, or residential, or small business, or medium, large enterprise, it was all lumped in there together. And the market could have almost been killed before it took off because of the early wish and requirements for $50 femtocells, and which is also why we elected as SpiderCloud not to go into the residential market whatsoever, but just focus on medium and large deployments when that became important. So I do believe that we are now starting the ramp-up phase, we're starting the deployments, and I speak of the enterprise venue and large buildings and so forth. We're just starting that right now because it's not that there has been any technology issues of getting it deployed, but we needed really the big guys to show up in the marketplace, like the Ericsson and Huawei and Alcatel-Lucent's been there from the beginning, and now Cisco is really in a big way, because it gives the operators the relief to know that the big vendors are behind us, And that's why I think we're seeing the ramp up now in 2015, 16, and frankly, a market that is estimated to be 2 to 4 billion over the next 4 to 6 years. Most recently today, Light Reading sent out an article or released an article talking about how Verizon's planning to spend $500 million on network densification. It's incredibly important what we do here, all of us. And the inhibitors to success, moving forward has to do with going from a 9 to 12 month operational procedures for larger DAS system and other things to being a very rapid deployment model using small cells that can be deployed in a matter of days, and maybe doesn't require the advanced planning that normally would take 3 or 4 site visits, but using the tools from iBwave and others can be deployed much faster.
So let's key off on that discussion. You talked a bit about the money that Verizon's spending, and how much they plan to spend on network densification. One of the, besides being famous for the fact that they're a SpiderCloud customer, I think that's probably what Verizon's probably best known for. But after that, most recently they've made news by being one of the companies out there supporting LTE in unlicensed spectrum. They talked about their interest there, which brings really the whole question of how do we see unlicensed spectrum, whether it's LTE in unlicensed spectrum, whether it's Wi-Fi in unlicensed spectrum. How do we see that fitting together with small cell deployments? I think there's no doubt, for one, I'm guessing we'd all be in agreement that we're going to hear a lot about LTE and unlicensed spectrum at Mobile World Congress this year. Is that fair to say? Are we all okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be part of it.
Yeah. I don't think it's any, no one will be surprised there. But the broader discussion of Wi-Fi and unlicensed spectrum, I know it's part of your solutions right now. I know you've done it, but how do you find that integrating? How much of is it a afterthought? Is it something that just, well, it needs to be there? Is it where you see your customers leading? Is it really part and parcel of it? How do you see that from a HetNet perspective? Your customers really thinking about that?
It's very early for LTE unlicensed. LTE Advanced is absolutely something that's being embraced in carrier aggregation. But when it comes to LTE unlicensed, use of any available spectrum is always going to be important, which is why Wi-Fi and cellular will live together for quite some time. But one thing we have to keep in mind is where LTE unlicensed will be deployed and where it makes sense. Outdoor, metro, stadiums, venues makes good sense. Deploying it inside of a medium and large enterprise, which is where we play, that's going to be a tough one, given the fact that enterprise IT, for the most part, look at that as their spectrum. So, for it to be commercially viable and deployable and a success, we need to keep in mind the constituencies that are involved in this and where it gets deployed. But it's absolutely something that, I think it's of keen interest from the operators, that they want to have it. It's something that we will support along with probably a long list of vendors.
So from a Wi-Fi perspective, Benoit, from a planning and deployment perspective, how? Let's skip the discussion of LTE-U or LTE-LAA. From just a pure Wi-Fi perspective, how does that fit into what you've been doing? How does that fit into what you see your customers really asking you for?
Okay, well, so we've been, when we started at iBwave, we're really focused on licensed spectrum and 2G and then 3G and LTE and now LTE Advanced and so on. And so a few years ago, we started introducing Wi-Fi as part of our solution, and today we continue to invest a fair bit in terms of Wi-Fi capabilities from our planning tools, because it's being increasingly used by customers. So today we offer Wi-Fi as part of our toolkit, but in the context of a multi-technology offering. So, but we see a lot of customers, for example, are using our toolkit to to plan Wi-Fi networks in very large venues, like in stadiums, for example, where there's a lot of complexity, there's inclined services, so these are more complex network. But more and more now we're seeing these professional tools that are being used for Wi-Fi planning of large and complex venues. So today we offer it as part of a multi-technology offering. And it's not limited to Wi-Fi as well in terms of unlicensed spectrum. So there's Zigbee as well and other technologies that are used for different applications. So they're part of the toolkit, but as a multi-technology offering.
So I mean, so it's fair to say that, you know, it's Wi-Fi is something that all your customers, all the operators are looking for, but really just as part of a larger solution where you have multiple technologies, probably will include some 3G, probably will include some LTE, going to include some LTE, and then maybe going forward that might involve some LTE in unlicensed spectrum. Is that a good way to position it?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
So how much of that do you think, you know, if we think about messages and we think about going back to Mobile World Congress, I tend to see Mobile World Congress not being the place where those sort of, I'm trying to figure out how to position it, those sort of more objective, more conservative, more realistic messages. It's not the place for that, sober messages, but more hyperbole. So this idea that 3G is going to live alongside LTE, going to live alongside LTE-A and Wi-Fi, you know, seems very logical, but I don't know if I'm going to hear a lot about that. Do you think we're going to hear a lot about that multi-technology messaging from some of the bigger vendors this year at Mobile World Congress, or is it really just it's an LTE world, if you're not in it, catch up, and those kind of messages?
Well, Peter, you know, the first time I can remember in, 12 years, and this is my 13th year going to Mobile Congress, last year we saw a much bigger presence from likes of IBM and SAP and HP and others. When they show up, as part of this, mobile world, and, we know the solutions of, being able to stitch this together and make this work wire to wireless and so forth, that they're there to make that happen. So whereas we may be focused on talking about the latest acronyms and small cells and virtualization and cloud and 5G, the bigger compute vendors are there to actually help make this work in the real world. So, I think a lot of those conversations are taking place with those companies, but maybe the headlines come from the latest device announcement, connected device, and latest wearables.
So I mean, so that's an interesting question, and kind of piggybacking off that, because I think you're definitely right. And when I talked a bit earlier about, I hope that we see this, and I hope that Mobile World Congress 2015 is seen as more than just a telco show. I mean, that was last year on a panel right around the keynote being given by IBM CEO Ginny Rometty, and it was the idea that one of the panelists was asking, I kind of don't understand why IBM is here. This is a telco show, and how do they fit in? And so I think 100%, I agree with you, Ronny, in terms of seeing those other people play, and those IT folks, those typically IT-oriented vendors. What does that say then about how we think about who the customers are and how you guys engage with them? I know that we've been talking a bit about this in terms of the structure of you guys working with carriers. And the carrier as your primary channel into the market, your primary customer. How are you seeing your engagement with specific enterprises and specific vendors? How do you think we're going to see that in Barcelona? Do you think there's going to be a larger focus on or a larger understanding of the folks that aren't telcos there, and at least based on your own experience?
Peter, I would have hoped that that's the case. We've been a proponent and an advocate to have more enterprises represented and to talk about their use cases and what their requirements are. We're starting to see more presence at the Speaker Bureau and some of these presentations that are being given. But I think we have still a long way to go to get better representation from the enterprise. The consumer, I think, has always been represented at that show.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. At least for us, iBwave, I think up to now, we've been primarily engaged with the network operators and their ecosystems of equipment providers and system integrators. But we're getting from every direction and from many different verticals. I mean, their show is about mobility, right, and touches on many verticals. And from our point of view, there's a strong desire to improve the indoor coverage for enterprises, and whether that's done through one technology or the other. And so we're engaging now increasingly with a lot of these articles, either through our existing channels, whether it's operators or system integrators that deal with the verticals, or directly through them as well. And ultimately, the challenges are the same. The mobility challenges are the same. So as with Ronny, I would expect to see more of that. But I think it might take some time before we see a lot of these enterprises being strongly represented at that show. Clearly,
but do you see specific needs from? I mean, do some of them stand out more than others? I mean, the idea about 5G being important from a vertical standpoint, or verticals being important from a 5G standpoint, is if there are specific requirements from specific verticals, right? Take connected car, right, or transportation, right? They may have specific needs in terms of proximity communications. They may have specific needs in terms of peer-to-peer communications, right? You can think about connected cars. I need to make sure my connected car is talking to the car in front of me, so I have super low latency, so when I step on the brake, they know I'm stepping on the brake and don't rear-end me. You can think about each of those verticals having their own little needs that ideally make it into those standards, right, going forward. So, I mean, can you think of, from an in-building standpoint, what you guys have been doing? Have there been specific verticals that you can think of that seem to be more important than others, or seem to be sort of getting their demands across a little bit better than others?
Well, there are general needs that cut across, whether it's banking, even into hospitals. Ease of installation and making sure that whatever you install connects to other things. We're going to be seeing soon, the kind of the enterprise nest, for lack of a better reference, where mobility and connectivity into the building management systems is such that heating and air conditioning turn up and down according to how many people are in the building or floor or a portion of that floor at any given time. Much like you want to have your mobile be in essence your mobile office, and you're just a 4-digit dial away when you get in the presence of a small cell network inside of a building. But at the same time, have full integration into links and being able to maybe book a conference room, or just randomly walking by a printer that you want to print to. That's connected enterprise that makes a difference, almost regardless of the vertical.
Yeah, and from our point of view is that there's connectivity is one thing, but I think connectivity with sufficient capacity is a bottleneck that we see commonly across many of those verticals. And that's really the big challenge here going forward, is that all these networks are becoming increasingly capacity limited, right? You can have all the bars in your phone, but you can't watch the news or access certain applications that require a lot of bandwidth inside buildings, and that's a common theme throughout.
Yeah, that's interesting, Benoit. I think I need to set you up with a conversation with my wife. She always has a hard time getting to the network. But I've got all these bars. but I've got all these bars that this should be working. Why can't I access Facebook or other mission critical things circa 2015? I think it's it definitely doesn't make sense to people, right? And I think particularly when it is more important than Facebook, it definitely doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference between coverage and capacity, as Benoit pointed out, and it's a real issue when you have shared capacity. It used to be dedicated capacity being used out there. If you're going to be successful in the enterprise, we need to solve that problem, and also do some education so that they do also understand the difference, and that Wi-Fi and cellular and Bluetooth all going to work together.
So, and that's, I think, it's interesting. So from that perspective, it's interesting. All these things working together kind of goes back to what you said early on, Benoit, in terms of a toolkit. Kind of goes back to sort of, my discussion earlier of 5G in terms of embracing all sorts of different technologies. To some extent, we position this as something new, right? that, well, looking forward to 5G, looking forward to, we have to have all these things work together. But the broader concept of interoperability, whether it's between standards or technologies or vendors, isn't new, right? I mean, we've had to integrate different components into solutions for years, right? So, I mean, or am I wrong? I mean, when you go in, Benoit, are you working with one set of small cell vendors and that's it, and you guys know how to plan a deployment and set something up for one particular access point and that's it? Or is this concept of we all need to have these things working together really just a reminder of we need to continue to do what we've been doing for years?
Yeah, I think it's a question of degree. You're absolutely right. It's not new that all these things need to work together. But again, I mentioned at the end of the day, what really matters here is improving the end user experience, right? And a lot of these technologies are completely transparent here to the end user. He just wants his phone to work no matter where he is. So it's about these technologies converging, and I think that increasingly that's happening. We see that one of the big roadblock is a strong word, but so it's one thing to have the technologies interact together, but collaboration is something that we see as being a big challenge. So we're also requiring in a concept of a heterogeneous network of different technologies to work together, but also different people that need to collaborate. So all of that works seamlessly. And that's a lot easier said than done. People are used to doing things a certain way, and it's a habit that can take a lot of time, even within companies. So for example, we talked about Wi-Fi and cellular technology interacting together, where typically these are very, very different people that manage these networks, that deal with these networks, working with very, very different tools. And now we're requiring a lot of those to work seamlessly together. Same with indoor and outdoor. Our focus is very much indoor in terms of planning these networks, but it's important to take into account the outdoor influence as well. And really small cells, if anything, are going to be a catalyst for a lot more interaction between the indoor and the outdoor environment. And there again, you have the same kind of challenge. Typically, different engineering groups, even sometimes within a company or within an operator. And so the collaboration is easier said than done. That takes a long time. Technology might be there, but the people might take a long time to really collaborate. So things are truly seamless.
Yeah, Peter, I think Benoit makes a very good point there, just about the whole collaboration inside of the same operator to having two vendors work together. I mean, you could be the operator as the customer who's trying to solve a problem for their customer, i.e. enterprise XYZ, and you're asking two vendors to work together, and where one vendor is the incumbent and maybe the incumbent macro vendor, and they're being asked to work together with a smaller company, that being either SpiderCloud or any of the other companies out there. And there's very little motivation for the incumbent to do anything, whether or not the customer said something. And it's different region by region. So it's not as clear cut as the customer said, make this happen. It can take a long time.
Yeah, definitely. And if I can build on that a little bit more, so if we look at one project, let's say whether it's an in-building, a DAS project, or a small cell project, across the life cycle of the project, you have a lot of different phases, and you have a lot of different stakeholders, right, or different groups or departments working on different phases, whether it's a phase of doing a site surveys or doing a design or commissioning a system or maintaining it down the line. And where we see time and time and again with everybody that we talk to is one of the big challenges is just a collaboration between the different stakeholders. And here we're not even talking different technologies. We're talking the same system, and you have the installers collaborating with the RF engineer, collaborating with the operation folks. So how files are exchanged back and forth in a way that is, I keep saying seamless, but error-free or efficient. And it's these little things that can take a long time and render the deployment of an in-building system not as efficient as it could be. And so we spend a lot of time trying to trying to oil that machine, if you will, but that is a big challenge. So again, it's collaboration, but in this case, within a project, just that alone is a big challenge.
So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I see we've got a couple of questions queued up. Before we get to those, one last question to bring this back to Mobile World Congress. I know that some of us have been to Barcelona for this show multiple times, but many folks, or maybe some folks listening in, haven't. So if you had one tip, I'll be lenient. If you had 2 or 3 tips to give folks who hadn't been to Mobile World Congress in the past, what are your top 3 tips that you think someone should know when they're going there? Ronny, I know you've got a favorite place to go and catch tapas. You want to share any of your tips, or share that, or anything else?
Yeah, no, I'll share a couple of tips first, and then a favorite tapas place, or even a favorite pub to go to. Never ever wear a wallet, plain and simply, and put all your money in the front pocket. Same thing with your cell phone. Anyone seen down on La Rambla, at midnight with a phone making calls to home, it will be snatched out of your hand most likely. And pace yourself. Don't get drunk on Sunday or Monday. Wait. And a good place to hang out and watch some good soccer games is Queen Vic at the end of La Rambla. Highly recommended, along with the Tapas chain. They have a lot of different locations around town, but absolutely great tapas.
Yes, so definitely probably not a good idea to get drunk and have your wallet, hold on to your wallet after midnight on the Ramblas.
They normally go hand in hand.
Yeah. I guess. Benoit, how about you?
Yeah, well, the comment that Ronny made at the beginning is spot on, especially in the trains. Just before the event and just after the event, when the trains are particularly full, this is when most of that happens. So so just wanted to mention that. And wear good shoes. I don't know. There's a lot of walking. It's a massive show. And in terms of best places to go, I'm not really local, and even though I've been in the industry for upwards of 30 years now, I haven't actually been to Mobile World Congress that many times. So, and I'm going to be really busy, so I'm not sure if I'm going to have the chance to do a lot of tapas bar hopping. However, I would like to say that on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, we're holding a cocktail event, and I know there's going to be great tapas there, I'm told. So, and the drinks are going to be very good and very cheap. So that's going to be a great event. So it's in Hall 7. There's going to be several hundred people there, so for sure there's going to be good tapas there. I can say that for sure.
Peter, if I may add one final tip, which is probably the most important of them all. As soon as you leave Mobile World Congress, just take off your badge and put it away. If you leave it on, you might as well just say, "Come and rob me."
Yeah, good point. Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting. I think it's as many times as I've had discussions about this. The basic tips are probably just the basic tips are the most obvious ones, right? Be comfortable. You're going to be doing a lot of walking. Make sure you take plenty of time to get something to drink, eat, all that good stuff, and don't kill yourself, because it's especially there for all 4 days. It goes pretty long. So there's still time for folks. If you did have questions you want to send in, please send them on in. We are here to go over those. In the meantime, we've got a few that have come in that we'll talk a bit to Ronny and Benoit a bit. So, again, I kind of we've discussed this a little bit in terms of the multi-generational technology side of things, and I think we all know that we're going to hear a lot about 5G. But it seems like, again, going back to the idea of what's sort of on the cutting edge of getting deployed versus, what's a hope someday in the future, that LTE Advanced is probably the more pressing or more likely to get deployed in the near-term type solution. It seems that the most, at least the biggest use case for LTE Advanced tends to be carrier aggregation. As you guys think about that in terms of what you're looking at, how does LTE Advanced fit into either the planning side of things or the deployment side of things? And I'm paraphrasing the question a little bit here, but as I think about that, what does LTE Advanced mean to you? And I guess we can even take this into the question, but do we think we'll hear a lot about LTE Advanced at the event? And from your perspective, how do you guys look at it in your businesses?
Well, I think most definitely we will hear about it, and there will be a lot of demonstrations and talks about it. From a SpiderCloud perspective, a lot of things that are in LTE Advanced is something that we've had in our system for quite some time. And we continue to talk about it, whether that's, the SON aspect of it or the asymmetric bandwidth and being able to support, a variety of different antennas and coordinated multi-point transmission and reception, all those things that are in LTE Advanced, we do support. Of all of them, the SON and the interference mitigation is probably the most important. So we do expect that to continue to be part of the discussion, but it's not something that's going to break out by itself and be its own sort of sub-theme at the conference. We expect, just like carrier aggregation is a table stakes, meaning you need to have it. LTE Advanced is in the same category.
Yeah, I would agree to that. It's for us, we support it as well, and in fact, some customers insist that we support it so that their networks, if it's not deployed today, they want to make sure that it's LTE Advanced ready. So from a planning perspective, we ensure that it's there, and the most important component of that is carrier aggregation. So at least that's what we're hearing so far. I know that last fall, actually fall of 2013, I was in SKT building and witnessed 128 megabits per second on my phone. So it was deployed and definitely working and very impressive. So to me, it's it's already well defined. It's incremental to existing LTE. So we want to make sure that the LTE networks are ready for that next step. So that's why some customers insist that that was available in our toolkit.
Thank you, Peter.
Peter?
Sorry, guys, I was speaking there, and I could hear you, and I wasn't on mute. So I guess this just goes back to the idea that maybe 5G will bring us higher availability in the network side of things. So another question is backhaul. Boring topic. Seems that we beat backhaul to death several years ago as LTE was coming online. Whether it's provisioning out to the nodes, whether it's planning it, whether it's how we think about multi-layered backhaul with headnets, small cells and macro cells. I mean, are you seeing anything change significantly there on the backhaul side of things? Any breakthroughs or big news you expect this year at Mobile World Congress, or just the regular slog of higher order modulation on microwave and new microwave form factors, and maybe a couple of things on the fixed line side? What do you think we're going to see, and what does backhaul mean to you guys?
I think you summarized it very nicely there, Peter. Not much to add. If you're a backhaul vendor, that's very important to you. Backhaul, where we get deployed, is not an issue. So it may be a subtopic, but it's more of a metro deployment, venue deployment type of issue than anything else.
Yeah, well, a couple of years ago, and I think you mentioned it, we're hearing a lot about it. And I think from an overall architectural standpoint, it was a bit of a thorn or a bit of a challenge. In the small cell forum, even set up a special interest group on backhaul to specifically address that aspect. Doesn't seem to be as big of a thorn anymore, but who knows? The networks, as I mentioned before, they continue to be capacity limited as opposed to coverage limited, and so backhaul are always going to be an important element of any capacity limited network. So as more and more bandwidth capacity is deployed to the very edge, I think backhauls is going to continue to remain an important element of that. And every year there's new and improved technology. Carriers are investing a lot into the backhaul networks. Maybe that's why we're not hearing as much about it anymore as we used to, but I think it's going to continue to be there going forward because we're dealing with increasingly capacity limited systems.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Final question. It looks like we've probably just got a few minutes left. Can squeeze in one more. IoT. You mentioned it up front that it was going to be probably one of the level-setting things, a common discussion point for a lot of folks. on the in-building side of things, are you seeing specific sort of interest in you guys being brought in either to enable IoT use cases? Are there certain things you have to do for that, or is that just part of a broader discussion of let's make sure we have coverage and capacity in building, and that's coverage and capacity for people, things, whatever it is?
So, Peter, you and I have actually covered this topic once before, but, for people listening in, last year there was a lot of focus on small cells as a subtopic, and we talked about how services is going to be a lot more visible of a topic, going into 2015. And I think we're right about that. I mean, anything that talks about beyond coverage and capacity and talking about enabling services that can drive additional revenues for the mobile operators and solve problems that the enterprises have is going to be of keen interest. And, last June, a year ago, we were, recognized along with HP and Vodafone for work in that area when it comes to, context and, also location-aware types of services. Intel has really been driving the agenda here inside the small cell forum when it comes to the importance of network function virtualization, enabling services, and a simple thing like being able to separate out the traffic of anyone inside of an enterprise that may be looking at content they shouldn't be looking at in at an enterprise or inside of a company can indeed be filtered out. Just a simple thing like that, and then of course you can talk about PBX integration and and other things, but being able to wash or filter content inside of the enterprise so that an enterprise or even a big company can be compliant, not just compliant on a wired network, but be also compliant on the mobile network. It's going to become increasingly important moving forward. So I think you will see not just from SpiderCloud but other companies showcasing what they can do beyond coverage and capacity and enabling services, especially into the enterprise and venues.
Well, I don't have much to add to this other than I think I expect a lot of those things other than cars and lampposts. I think a lot of those things that are connected are going to be indoors, and so the RF, it continues to be tricky from an RF standpoint, so I definitely see a good overlap here between, to answer your original question, between in-building and Internet of Things going forward for sure.
I don't know. I mean, cars are indoors, parking garages, and
to
Ronny's point before, I've been inside the Ericsson booth at Mobile World Congress, and they have lampposts. So that's you never know. Well, thank you guys. Thanks Benoit. Thanks Ronny. I think it looks like we're just at about the top of the hour here. So thank you for your thoughts about Mobile World Congress, your thoughts about Barcelona, your thoughts about technologies. I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who listened in. Just as a reminder, you will again get a link sent to this sent out to you later on this week. I encourage you, if you have a chance, to go visit the iBwave and SpiderCloud booths. You heard from Benoit. There's going to be a cocktail there with iBwave. So go take advantage of their free alcohol. And beyond that, thank you all once again. Thanks, Ronny. Thanks, Benoit.
Peter.
Thanks, everyone.
Benoit.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Cheers.